Okay, everybody. Welcome to this evening's seminar, which is part of the Human Trafficking Initiative seminar series. I will start introducing today's meeting while we wait for more people to join, if anybody will. My name is Sara Penicino. I am an adjunct professor here of international law. Specifically, I teach international human rights law in the second semester. At SAIS, together with Alexandra, we have built the project called Human Trafficking Initiative that you may have heard about during the presentation during Open Weeks when you arrived. Many of you did apply to take part of the project, and about that, of course, we're very grateful considering the time and availability of the both of us. Of course, we cannot welcome everybody, but we very much appreciate the interest that you all showed for this project. Now, moving forward to today's meeting, we have two guests that we are very honored are here tonight with us. And then, again, this is just a short introduction because really I'm going to leave the floor to Alexandra, who is going to moderate this meeting. Tonight's seminar is entitled Advantages of the Blockchain, and it focuses on how a partnership between private and other non-traditional subjects and through law enforcement can disrupt organized crime. This is really a meeting that aims at offering a very specific the very specific perspective that we decided to embrace with the Human Trafficking Initiative, which aims not only at carrying out research in a field that we deem is very important for today's actions against human trafficking, but is definitely broader, and it encapsulates our idea that academics and practitioners should come together in order to tackle today's challenges in an innovative way. For this very reason, so we try to do that in our little, in a smaller dimension, if you want. But this is also the reason why I'm very glad and honored to welcome tonight Alexandra Andhov, who is an associate professor of law at the University of Copenhagen, who has a very specific expertise that combines a deep knowledge of areas like blockchain, crypto assets, artificial intelligence, but also a practical activity in this area. So just to mention one of the most impressive achievements by Alexandra, she founded the Copenhagen Legal Tech lab, and she has since then been involved as a member in the boards of many startups in the Nordic context. And she is always very active in being engaged in NGO and firms that work in the field of finance. And again, as we were saying, she plays advisory roles, and she stands as a dynamic and forward-thinking expert in relevant fields. Connected with us from remote is Michal Gromek, that we welcome again from remote. Michal is the co-chair and initiator of the Digital Asset Taskforce, and again, he shares knowledges and solves challenges within fintech. He has been a director within the executive education of the Stockholm FinTech Week, and he's also a Forbes contributor on the topics of fintech and decentralized finance for the past half a decade. As I anticipated, Alexandra will moderate this seminar. Alexandra, for those of you that still do not know, but I bet that most of you do, is not only the co-coordinator of the Human Trafficking Initiative here at SAIS. She's a Slovak lawyer. She has wide experience in the specific field of human trafficking, but not only. She has been involved in the work of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. She was the national project officer in Bratislava for the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. She has been involved with OSCE. She has worked for the Council of Europe in the monitoring body on the implementation of the Convention Against Trafficking. I am not going to go on and on about the resume of our speakers and participants to this meeting, and I am actually going to leave the floor to you. So thank you all very much. There's going to be Q&A time at the end, so you will have the opportunity to ask questions to our guests. Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you all for being here in presence and online, and most of all, thanks to Dr. Andhov and Michal Gromek for having dedicated their time to us tonight. I'm not going to take any longer. I just want to go back to the name of our today's session, and it is non-traditional partnerships in actually disrupting organized crime and looking into cryptocurrencies and blockchain. Why have we put this name to this event? Is there's maybe two sides of the same coin, so to say. We have challenges in terms of cryptocurrencies and blockchain when we talk about child abuse material, child ransomware, stolen funds, terrorism financing, darknet market, cybercriminal administrator, fraud shops. These are the challenges. At the same time, blockchain offers opportunities of how to disrupt this. So this was actually the reason to even bring closer the terminology to the practitioners and to shed light on some technicalities that may be putting off those who may not dedicate their time to this particular topic, make it understandable, make it closer to the audience as such. And for that, we have two most renowned world experts here tonight, Dr. Andhov and Michal Gromek. So Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you both for very kind and very, very kind introduction. And thank you all for finding time and coming and joining us today. We've discussed the way how, this kind of seminars could be conducted. And I believe that probably the most beneficial is if we do a little bit of a kind of a jump into a session, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to terminology, when it comes to what actually is blockchain, what actually are digital assets, crypto assets. And then we will talk a little bit also about different kinds of cases to make it a bit more interesting, and then leave hopefully somewhere between 20-30 minutes, maybe even more, if Michael will speak quicker. We know each other well, so you will see there will be some innuendos, but he can't speak at this moment, so the floor is mine. I'm sure he will give his perspective when he has the chance. All right. So Alexandra, so now you will have two Alexandras, but yeah, Alexandra has mentioned that, a lot of magic happens when different stakeholders start to collaborate. And this is actually also how me and Michael started to collaborate. And this goes actually a few years back when he was still, and he's still, but at that time he was one of the initiators of the Stockholm FinTech Week. And then he also was organizing different kinds of talks about blockchain and where is the regulation going. And today I can tell you that there is a regulation, but at that time there was no regulation. So it was really a little bit of a wild, wild west. And then at some point, because of this wild, wild west, we also kind of got together and wrote a piece that we will discuss a little bit later, which was about Slovakia as well. Which ultimately showcased that when you truly have or truly lack, one could say, policy perspectives and understanding of the topic, and you think that some regulation are there only to being transplanted and not really understand how they should be transplanted, you can create a real black hole. And just to give you very brief numbers, a country like Slovakia, which is 5.5 million, has more than 550 crypto asset providers, or so to speak, virtual asset service providers, VASPs, whereas France or Germany have less than 30. Okay, and we will talk about the specifics and what does this mean. But before that, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, I'll give you a little bit of intro about the blockchain, crypto assets, a little bit also about the regulation, given the fact that I'm a professor of law. And then Michael will tell you a little bit more about some of the cases that he had worked on, which are extremely interesting and extremely engaging and a little bit frightening at the same time. Yeah, sounds good. All right, let's see whether the technology works. It doesn't. Yeah. There you go. All right. Yes. So I'll just quickly go through this. Yes. So you just see what I just mentioned a second ago. All right. So world is about power and money. And many or often the crypto asset as a market is connected not necessarily with good things. And part of this kind of session here today is really to not say that it's all about good or bad, but it's technology, okay? And as any technology, it can be used or it can be misused. The same way how you might be using ChatGPT to get great ideas for essays, which can be a good thing. Some of you might use it full time to write the essay for you, which might be the misuse, right? But the decision I'll leave for you. So this is the kind of the size of the market capitalization of crypto assets. You can see that currently, as they would say, in regards to the financial industry, we are in bear market, so it's kind of bumped down. The market or the market capitalization was above $3 trillion. Currently, is somewhere around 1.5 trillion. So we are not talking about a small market. We're actually talking about fairly substantial market. Some of the data here very quickly. So 1.5 trillion just this year. When we talk about crypto assets or digital assets, and I will also a little bit clarify the different types of crypto assets. But today we have almost 11,000 different digital assets, okay? When I teach a course called Blockchain in Capital Market and Technology in Capital Market Law, and a year ago, or a year and a half ago, when I was preparing and also kind of, refreshing my market data, at that point it was 7,000. So, which would tell you that despite the fact that the market is down, in vis-a-vis where it was in 2020 or 2019, still this market is fairly vivid. It's fairly active. There are new market participants that are coming and joining the market. It is also a global phenomenon. So it's not just the United States, it's not just the European Union. You see more and more Asian or APAC countries around the world to truly become, and the moment you start to work, yeah. So it's not just a Western world that is active, but more and more. Also, one could also see a lot of happening in Saudi Arabia, for example, these days. Would be very excited to have your startup if you like. Now, because of the negative context in which the digital assets often come to, you have a lot of countries, for example, China, India, to some extent also Russia, that would prohibit some types of crypto assets, or they would substantially increase the taxation for the crypto assets, right? Because one of the things that a lot of regulators, and here I start speaking a little bit about the regulation, is when there is a new technology or a new product, what is usually the first thing that the regulators do? Well, they start to think, what does it look like? How does it behave? Can we regulate it in the same way as we are regulating something different, right? And this is precisely what happened when Bitcoin came back in 2008, was that simply, is this money? Is this security? Is this something else? and we can talk about it, right? Okay. But so, and it's a little bit, yeah, I think that this might not be the best word, but I think you'll get what I mean by that. It's a little bit of schizophrenic, this kind of a setup for the digital assets, because on one hand, you have lots of governments kind of criticizing it and obviously seeing it as negative. And it is often connected with human trafficking. It's often connected with organized crime, with financing terrorism, and so on and so forth, to which we will allude in a minute. But at the same time, and I don't know whether you remember because you are such a, young bunch, but 2007, 2008, what happened then? Financial crisis, right? And actually the reason why Bitcoin came around was because it was seen as a kind of a fight against the classical financial institutions. It was seen as something that will democratize financial market, that it will give power back to the people, right? Not just the banks and the financial institutions, but really we can put away all of these big, predominantly white men who are deciding how the power is distributed and how the money are distributing around the globe, and give power to the individuals or to small communities and so on. And I want you to remember this because I think it's important when we talk about the blockchain and crypto assets. But besides this, so we have the historical perspective, and I will come back to it. Then we have, let's say, the fact that the market is a little bit down, but there is still activity going on. Then we have some countries around the world that say, we don't want this. We want to outlaw it. And I mean, look around, we still haven't been very successful in outlawing basic drugs, I'd say. So I'm not sure that that's the right way ahead. And at the same time, the same countries will say, well, we like the technology and we are going to use the technology for our own centralized currencies, right? So we will have it for digital yuan, we will have it for the digital Swedish crown, we will have it for digital euro, we'll have it for the digital US dollar, et cetera, but we do not want digital currencies that are private. And we can talk also about the history of the money, and then I can tell you that just going 60 years back, we only had private money. But that's another topic. Anyhow. Yes. So deconstructing and really thinking about digital assets, there are three layers. There's the technology that is behind it, there is the purpose, and there is the value. Naturally, the technology is evolving whenever someone is talking about blockchain and can we do this, right? Because blockchain is the underlying technology. I would urge you to think about blockchain today as was, and again, you are too young maybe for that, but as internet was in 1992. Like whenever I teach this class, I use this sound and sorry for making the noise, but it would be like, you won't remember. We all remember when you plugged in the cable, right? A couple of decades back. So it's something like that, all right? So you have this technology that is obviously, as any technology, still evolving, but has potential for something, and I'll allude to this. Then is this purpose, and we humans give purpose to something, and again, the value, we give the value, whether this is something that we want to have in our society or not. Okay, going to the technology itself. There are three different definitions that I'm bringing it. And then you have the Philippian Wright, who wrote one of the first books on blockchain law. And their definitions, I will not reread it. You can have a look at it. I will also share my slides afterwards. Then you have an IBM definition, and then you have a Merriam-Webster definition, right? And they are very similar to one extent or the other. But ultimately, what I want you to remember about the blockchain are certain elements. And these are the three ones. One is that it's a database. It's just a database. And Michael, I'm sure he will also touch upon this. So if you do not remember anything else after this kind of hour and a half of us sitting together, if you remember that it's a database, then we're good to go. Then it's a particular thing how the data is saved, and it's saved on in these blocks. And if we had more time, I could show you and tell you a little bit more about how the saving mechanism works and what is hashing and these different kinds of cryptography tools that are out there. And then there is this part of it, why it's promising ultimately, is that it's transparent, and it's very hard. I will not say it's impossible, because everything is possible, but it's very hard to change something on the blockchain without making sure that everyone sees it. And what do I mean by that? The way how the new data is stored in this database is that the new blocks are created. Nothing gets rewritten, nothing gets deleted. There is a new block that adds, that changes the truth or the value or whatever. But however past you want to go in the history, you always can, okay? And these are the things. And then, of course, there are several other elements when it comes to cryptography and the security of blockchain and so on, which are important, and why many believe that this is a promising technology. But also another thing that many computer scientists would tell you is that ultimately a number of elements of the blockchain have been in existence for the past 20, 30 years. It is just because of the computer potential and the power of the computers that we have today that we can bring them together. But that's, again, maybe next time. Anyhow, so it's a ledger. Oops, going back here, right? Where we can show and store all different kinds of data. This data can be anything that you can imagine. We can redo the registries of the real estate, right? This is a common used kind of a tool of blockchain in some of the countries, actually. We can use it for securing different kinds of financial transactions. So we go through digital assets and so on. So yeah, so imagine this database. That's the main point. And then depending, and I do believe that sometimes visuals help more than words, you can store it and you can design it in different ways. And we can also, I do think I have one slide that is about specific types of blockchains, but it's ultimately, it's a decentralized, right? Okay, so we set, and now we all know that's a database. Now the second part, why it's interesting, is decentralized. What does that mean? It means that all of us would be storing the information, and in order for us to change the information, 51% would need to agree to that, to change it. And of course, it's not in a classical way that we agree, but it's a computational way how we agree that the information is changed. But in this way, we make sure that actually it's not one person or one entity that is able to control singularly all the data that is out there. Okay, so just to reemphasize, it's distributed, it's often public. So you have access, you can check, even in Bitcoin, you can go and check who own particular Bitcoin and what point in time in the history. And it's write only, so you cannot rewrite, you cannot delete per se. And as I mentioned, there are the kind of the three main ones, the public, private, and there's also hybrid. Yeah, but I'll just leave it as is. How do you do what? Oh, you can ask later. Okay. All right. So I mentioned to you a little bit about the Bitcoin, right? And often people believe that Bitcoin is blockchain and blockchain is Bitcoin. Again, this is not the case. Blockchain is the technology and Bitcoin is the application. And even though, again, Bitcoin was the first that was applying or was built upon blockchain, there are, as you know by now, more than 10,000 other digital assets that are using the technology. And here, one of the first use cases where blockchain was used was Silk Road. Do we know what is Silk Road? There are some noddings. There is some hesitation in the face. So Alex, what was Silk Road?
Do you mean the ancient Silk Road? No, then tell us, what was the Silk Road?
No, I mean the digital Silk Road. Meaning there was a kind of this was a dark web kind of a website where you could digitally order drugs guns, where you could also order assassination of a person if you really liked. And it was done all on the dark web. And the way how people would pay was by using digital assets. But actually, the Silk Road was, there were enforcement agencies that figured out who was the creator of the Silk Road, and it was shut down. But I'm sure that there are a number of other roads on the dark web, and I'm sure Michael will tell us as well. All right, now going to the favorite part of mine, which is the regulation, given the fact that I'm a lawyer, right? So Bitcoin, 2008, regulation, 2022. Okay, that's the reality of the world that we live in. And on the one hand, you have really, let's say, a group, entities, startups, and so on that believe that there is a tool, that their technology that could help people. You still have, if you think about it, more or around somewhere between 30 to 40% of the world population that is unbanked. Okay, obviously majority is in the South Hemisphere, but still there are lots of people who do not have access to bank, who cannot send money from one account to another, etc., etc. Blockchain could be a solution. Now, but because of the lack of regulation and lack of understanding how we could use this technology, many of the regulators, besides of, you know, trying to figure out whether we could use the existing regulation on this, had applied one of the three policies, and maybe Sarah can help me here as well, what the policymakers do when there is a new phenomenon is wait and see. What the others do, not do anything at all, and not plan to do anything at all, or then become active. Maybe there is a fourth one, I don't know. Right? And majority of them, ultimately, if you think and look through the global regulatory framework, you'll see that there were some that were super active and they were welcoming. One of them was Switzerland. Okay. You could pay already in 2010 your taxes in one particular canton called Zug. You could pay your taxes by Bitcoin. Okay. Then you could also pay for a hotel in Palo Alto in California back in 2011 with Bitcoin and so on. So this was the early ages, one could say, where it was seen as, okay, this is the future and this is what's going to happen, and we want to embrace it. And one of the reasons, obviously, is that because you create a, let's say, positive environment, lots of startup will come in and maybe it will boost your economy. And then there was also those who were a little bit more afraid, and then started to be, obviously, because people are creative and they're we're misusing this technology, lots of fraud cases. So more and more financial kind of crime investigators would come in, and enforcement agencies and so on. But that's another thing. Now, when we think about regulating the blockchain, there are a couple of elements here. What we could look at. Okay, so I'm getting a specific kind of timekeeper comment that I should finish early or soon. But anyway, when you think about the regulation, the way how you could regulate it is you regulate the technology. So imagine the regulation around cars, right? You know, cars at the very beginning were regulated similarly as trains when they emanated, right? When they started to have. So you needed 2 drivers. True story. So you could regulate the technology, which is never a good idea. Or then you can regulate how you apply the technology, so the products, which could be crypto assets. Or you can regulate kind of the entire ecosystem. So not the product, but those who offer services when it comes to those particular products, right? And then there is a lot of indirect regulation. And Michael will for sure mention it, that when it comes to the crypto assets, already anti-money laundering regulation is applicable, and so on, and some others. All right, so I'll quickly go through this one, Alex, and then I'll give the word to Michael, okay? All right, so several years later, 2008, 2022, to be fair, the EU started to talk about this digital finance package already in 2019 and adopted the first kind of elements in 2020. Ultimately, long story short, is that the EU understood that this technology is not going anywhere, and obviously we need to do something, and the best way to do it at the EU level, right? So it adopted several of the kind of policy papers, how to approach it, and what kind of directives or regulations need to be adopted, and also several kind of policy priorities that they wanted to kind of adhere to. Before saying and going further, also given the fact that many of you do study law or have some kind of a policy background, here are some of the elements that naturally policy providers and regulators need to have on their mind when adopting new regulation or when talking about, let's say, digital assets, right? So it's all connected to protecting an individual. So truly protecting someone like, imagine your grandma or grandpa, not necessarily having all of the digital savviness and yet using this tool. Protecting the market from the macroeconomic perspective, regulatory foreseeability for all of the startups or enterprises or entrepreneurs that are out there and want to introduce new products or new services, right? And then at all of this, obviously, there are technological limitations that we have, operational vulnerabilities, and so on. And this is important to remember. And now the final thing that I'll say, and then I'll leave it to Michael probably, is that voila, we are finally in a day and time where we know for sure that the market in crypto assets, or as some call it, MiCA or MiCA, or I'm sure Italians will have another third pronunciation or of this abbreviation. It's a regulation. So those of you who had EU law know that this regulation does not need any kind of transplantation into the national regulation. It just is going to be fully applicable. It's a really long regulation. It's more than 300-page long. And what it ultimately does, it actually defines 3 types of digital asset tokens, e-money, and then utility tokens. And the asset tokens, they ultimately will be covered, which are the classical crypto assets, where you would have a certain tool to exchange on the financial market, will be covered by this regulation at the EU level. So long story short, and now maybe giving the space to Michael, is ultimately realizing that yes, for many, many years, the EU didn't have a specific plan, although there are countries that are more welcoming within the EU and the countries that are less welcoming when it comes to crypto assets. And then there are naturally enforcement agencies that are less and more knowledgeable about digital assets and blockchain as such. And the last thing that I'll say before is that please do not forget, again, this is about the technology, the underlying technology, right? When we talk about blockchain. And it has many, many positive attributes, and Michael will allude to it, which is actually traceability, even though it was mentioned before that a lot of classical financial, let's say, operators or investors or people who work in compliance within banks are afraid of the crypto assets because they believe that, you know, the moment there is a crypto asset, they can't see where the money is going or where the value is going. This is not necessarily the case. There are tools, there are softwares, and one could argue that with crypto assets, you can trace money much more than you can with a classical financial institutions. Because please do not forget that the Bank Secrecy Acts are still there. And for example, the moment, and I used to also work with intelligence services, private, not government one, business intelligence. And we had, this is back in 2015, 2014. And I had one case when the money entered Bank of China. And that was it. Okay, I'll leave it here and leave it to Michael to take you through interesting cases. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Alex. This is exactly, before I give the word, the floor to Michael, I wanted to just read very quickly a comment he put while you were speaking, going back to Mika and explaining, you know, why is it so important that we actually have Mika in place? It's, you know, Michal said, regulators tend to copy paste regulation from the offline world to cryptocurrency. And he said, this is like you would apply fax regulations to emails, on emails. Yeah. So it's very understandable to all of us that that would not work. Is it exactly this, Michal, that we tend not to understand what's exactly behind, because maybe we are being put off by the high-tech language that it's saying, well, this is like too much IT. I don't really want to have anything to do with this as a regular police, as a regular prosecutor, as a judge, because it's completely unknown to me, translated to a language that I understand, so I can imagine what's behind. Can you tell us, is this really it? Because if, for example, we take the case, the Forbes article that you have written together with Alexandra on exactly the Slovakian case study, where we have 550 VASPs within its jurisdiction in such a small country like a Veneto region, and the national central bank would tell you that they don't consider them a part of the financial market. Is this the lack of understanding, or is it because there's something wrong in the state of Denmark, so to say? Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. Usually when I have been working with policymakers, and I think now I just came back home from Georgia, Armenia, and I trained the Ukrainians in Vienna. Think about this from a human perspective. Usually there are individuals who already work with sanctions, or they work with financial institutions. The sanctions have been blowing up during the last 2 years. And on top of it, then they are being forced to do virtual assets. So I know very, very few policymakers which actually have been really hired in order to do virtual assets. They rather have been doing everything else, and on top of it, they started to do virtual assets. So there is a human limitation. On top of it, we have challenges because it's enough when you just Google Bitcoin knowledge or how to learn Bitcoin, and you will most likely land on 750,000 fraudulent websites, which will then convince you that this particular token is better than any other token. So we have this problem as well from an academic perspective, because in order to do fintech and then blockchain-based finance, you have to have a mix of experts which have a legal background, which have a financial background, which have an economical background, which have and it's, I think, as technology is global from day one and everything clusters, unfortunately our society isn't, and that's a little bit the challenge that we usually have. So policymakers would like to do the correct and best decisions, but they don't really have the means to learn where they can take those best decisions. And then they don't really have anyone to ask for help, if I'm that honest. And I'll just comment on Mika, and I promise I'll just jump to my presentation, because I asked Alexandra for 60 hours of time with you, and she gave me 25 minutes, which is not a lot. For all of you who have watched Game of Thrones, or any kind of a Brazilian telenovela, I think this is very similar to how the Mika discussions have looked like. So each Thursday, there was some kind of an email that arrived and said, okay, now payment service providers are included in Mika. Now payment service providers are excluded of Mika. Okay, EU, what are you doing? You know, you just now include or exclude like a huge part of the ecosystem. Now you need to be a capital something institution in order to not have to apply for Mika. Now you have to be a registered entity. No, now you don't have to be a registered entity. You have to be a licensed entity. So the interesting part is when I'm traveling outside of the EU, a lot of countries surrounding the EU are convinced that Mika is like some kind of a holy grail of the crypto regulation, but it isn't. It's a summary of compromises that we had to do, and on top of it, there was a time period when we just had to close up those entire discussions and say, okay, now the EU, please do your work in order to discuss with all of those member states how to implement Mika. But it really feels like we would be regulating only, okay, I'll now make things up, like Messenger, right, from all of your communication apps, but there is still Telegram, there is Signal, there's WhatsApp, and we just close our eyes and pretend they don't exist. oh wait, there will be Mika 2, 4, 7, 8, 10, 15. So we will then be able to catch up on Signal. Okay, but a Signal exists as of today. We have to take care of it as of today. So Mika does not include NFTs and a long list of things which we already have challenges with. It just includes something. So we have a good now pan-European concept on how to do this. But only for a very limited scope of crypto. So of course, it's great that a lot of countries are looking up to it. I rather see it as Game of Thrones, and I know that 10 seasons are supposed to be upcoming in order to clarify some of the things that have happened there. But let us maybe stop there. I will try to share my screen as well, to not take away time from myself, in case that's fine. Because Alexandra has given me the possibility to speak a little bit about some of the cases, and has limited me strongly on what I can and cannot show, because sometimes I do admit that I lose track of what can be displayed and what cannot be. Can you see my screen well now?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Okay, and you can hear me. You can hear me well. Okay.
Wonderful.
I'm now timing 20 minutes, promising Alexandra. Good. The best way for me to show you how crypto regulation works in practice on how it's supposed to be working is to display some cases to you. This is an AI-based generated video of 2 soldiers, because we have been in a team of experts investigating crowdfunding of the Lugansk People's Republic and the Donetsk People's Republic, where they have been using Telegram channels. And they were crowdfunding funds with crypto in order to purchase firearms. So I just wanted to show you a visualization outcome out of it. And of course, it's just a visualization of a particular challenge, but you can copy paste it to everything that you work with. Corruption, human trafficking. It's just an example of how this can work in practice. Good. So it's very important because I'm associated with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the Global Coalition to Fight Financial Crime, and Forbes. All of those opinions are, of course, expressed today, are my own opinions and do not reflect the situation and the feedback from those organizations. I would like to underline what Alexandra has said. And I'm an eternal optimist. So of course, crypto is providing or has been providing a lot of challenges, but it does provide a lot of opportunities as well. When you have been an investigator, usually when you have seen that a client has transferred money out and they have transferred the money to some kind of a other bank account in another country, you had to, from a Stockholm office, reach out to the international office. The international office had to reach out to somebody in the UK office, in the London office, inform them about the bank account details. And then they had to reach out to some kind of a regional agency somewhere to make sure that this data can be shared. And by then the transfers all have already left and have reached some kind of a tax paradise. So of course, with cryptocurrency, the possibility, what it gives you is when you have the proper software and you understand how this works and it's not as difficult, then you can actually make your coffee and sit with somebody else and you can do an international investigation and visualize a lot of different transfers and change data information that we have not been able to do before. On top of it, we don't have to ask anyone for permission. So we have an instant international visualization of different transfers. Okay, sounds very abstract. I will just show it to you in examples. And then again, what Alexandra said, that of course is a database. I like to explain Bitcoin a bit, or blockchain a bit of a different way. For me, it's like a Google spreadsheet where I give you view access, so then you can see what I'm doing. So we can see whatever I'm adding in this particular type of my Google Doc spreadsheet or like an Excel spreadsheet, but you have a view-only access with the difference that you cannot erase anything. The good part about blockchain for me is that it remembers everything forever. So we have been having a lot of those different individuals who have conducted transfers to Silk Road in 2011, 12, 13. We can investigate them today. We can connect their identity. We can still see who has been selling on Silk Road, even though 10 years, 15 years, significant amount of years have passed. So blockchain remembers everything forever. And it allows us to do something from an investigator perspective to reopen those cases. So there have been a lot of cases that have been closed a couple of years ago, and we could not so it would not be possible for us to have this session 5 or 6 years ago because the technology was just not there. But now we have the possibility to reopen cases where we have seen that some pretty evil individuals have transferred some kind of money to the crypto ecosystem. And we have not been having those tools historically. But when I pitch different cases to police officers and prosecutors, they are not very happy about reopening those cases because it's very complicated. But I think for me, blockchain-based investigations can be very strongly correlated with the discovery of DNA. So we have seen a lot of cases, primarily the murder cases, have been able to be reopened before they expired because of the technology we have discovered in regards to DNA. That's very similar to blockchain-based investigations. So I wanted to show you 750 million different cases. We can limit this to 1.5. So there will be, there's one case I was involved in. This was a Twitter hack that has incorporated the hack of the Twitter account of Barack Obama, Elon Musk, Will Smith, surprisingly not Donald Trump. And then there is the crowdfunding case of the Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic. But due to their restraints on time, I will just give you a teaser for the Twitter hack as asked by Alexandra. So what has happened with the Twitter hack? Of course, we see that criminals act in exactly the same way offline and online. It's July 15th, so it's a peak time in Sweden, right? After summer, nobody is really working. The police is on holiday as well. And we can see that there is a Twitter hack of 130 Twitter accounts of very prominent individuals. For those of you who sit in the back, it's Joe Biden, it's Elon Musk, it's Apple. And the messages are, of course, tweaked depending on the different group, which is then following this particular individual's or companies. There's a time urgency that says, I'm feeling very grateful. Please transfer a certain amount of money to this particular charity. When you give $1,000, I give them $2,000. Or when you give them $500, I give you $1,000. It's only valid for the next 30 minutes, right? So it's a typical hack. Interestingly, it's the media is reporting it as a Bitcoin hack. It has been a Twitter hack, not a blockchain hack. In the same way how when the light bulb breaks down in your house, you will not really say that electricity is broken. You would say that, you know, the light bulb is broken. So it was a Twitter hack here. That's a good example. I have covered this on Forbes too, of the post that has featured Barack Obama. And what you can do, and I will not go very strongly into details of the blockchain-based investigations, but you can see this very weird collection of letters and numbers, B, C, Y, Q, whatever. So this can be just copy-pasted and just placed into a browser. And when you do that, you will instantly see, because cryptocurrencies, the leading cryptocurrencies are pseudo-anonymous. It's a very weird term. What it means in practice is that you can open this particular cryptocurrency wallet address like a bank account, and you can see the amount of transactions that have been coming in, going out, the amount of transactions which have been flowing into this account, how much money is still kept into this in this particular account. And this is pretty interesting because 90% of the requests that I have been receiving from law enforcement, being a chief compliance officer of a publicly traded company, was a long letter that says, you have 48 hours to tell me how much money is in this account. And I literally wanted to send them back a message that says, why don't you just Google? Just Google. But of course I couldn't. So I had to provide them this long answer with like, hey, you can see this amount of money. So this was a lack of knowledge. Here we have been able to recover a significant amount of those funds. Since I think this is 17th of July when I have covered it. Let me have a look. On the 15th of July is when it happened. We have been able to find the suspect and put him behind bars in roughly the beginning of August, right? So this was pretty quick. Roughly 150,000 US have been collected and sent to different centralized exchanges, of which some have been recovered. So it's not the largest scam on earth involving all of those different famous accounts. But this was a good example of what we can do when we pull together. But when there has been a Twitter account hacked from Barack Obama, the former US president, those cases might receive a bit more of publicity and then urgency than cases that we might be maybe working on a daily basis. Or working in countries which are already have a difficult jurisdiction. The crowdfunding of weapons, the second topic. And of course, in the Q&A, when any of you would like to ask me, how did we actually really find a suspect? I have follow-up slides to show you exactly step by step how this has been done. So, of course, in this seminar, so once again, thank you for having me today. We're only looking specifically into on the blockchain, but there have been more technologies that have merged together. So please do not see one technology like standalone. What we have been now working with on an international perspective, both public and private, is the perspective that, okay, those cryptocurrency wallet addresses that you have seen, those very weird abbreviations of letters and numbers, they are perfect for data scraping. Just from an academic perspective, because this is just not something that you would publish on a website or send to me in a Telegram channel with asking me how my day was, and you just type in the cryptocurrency wallet address. So we have Telegram channels, we have been having data scraping, we have the blockchain-based investigation tools. So why don't we just combine everything together? So this is a very famous stamp that the Ukrainian Postal Service has released. We are all aware of the ongoing conflict. I will promise to not unleash any kind of cruel pictures on you. I think we have seen enough from within the last years. This has been a fake claim that the Russian Postal Service has released a similar similar stamp in connection with destroying an American drone, what turned out to be fake news. Just for the background, the Russian Prime Minister said that Russia holds an estimate 130 billion in cryptocurrencies. Russia doesn't really have a clear cryptocurrency policy. It doesn't have to have any kind of clear cryptocurrency AML policies either. But big numbers are very difficult for us to understand. So 130 billions are roughly half of the GDP of Finland. So I think just for you to get a perspective how big those numbers are. Okay, just to the cases. This is the Ukrainian army's wallet, where everybody can go on the website and pay in a certain amount of crypto. You can see different type of cryptocurrencies. On top of it, you can see a Bitcoin wallet. There's an Ether wallet, USDT wallets, different cryptocurrencies in the same way how we have different currencies. So when we just take one of the Bitcoin wallets, what is possible is to type them into Google as well, and instantly you'll see how much money has been erased by the Ukrainian government in this particular cryptocurrency wallet. But of course, what we can do for the Ukrainians, we can do for the Russian side too. So then here, it is just about taking this particular cryptocurrency wallet from Ukraine. And what is being marked, we copy paste it into Google. Then for this particular type of within this particular type of wallet, we have seen that they have been 18,000 transactions that were flowing in into this wallet, which are roughly 450,000 Bitcoin. Then we'll have to calculate what was the value of Bitcoin in the year 2022. It has been a significant amount of number. Why is this relevant? Because within the regulatory frameworks, we are pushing for more and more of transparency on the blockchain. So we would like to see individuals being able, so investigators being able to connect ID in the same way how you transfer money on a SWIFT network. So when you do a bank transfers internationally, then we can see your first name, last name. We can see maybe your address, some kind of a messaging system. This is something that the Financial Action Taskforce would like to want as well. And it's important for child sexual abuse. It's important for a lot of different work that we are connected with to fight terrorism. But if we push too much on transparency, then it is very clear that both Ukraine as of Russia will be able to see who has paid into their particular type of wallets. And both Russia could see who, and on the territory of Russia, could potentially pay into the Ukrainian wallets, so people's life can be at stake, and this and the same in other jurisdictions as well. So there is a discussion that we need to have in terms of how much transparency versus privacy, but this is a general discussion that we have to have with financial crime fighting. Okay, so then what have we done? Ukrainians have been crowdfunding their military with crypto. So has been the defenders of Donbass. You can see a cryptocurrency wallet address, for example, for Bitcoin. So what we have done is we have taken a time span between the 15th of July and October 14th, 2022, and started to identify in the beginning Russian-speaking Telegram channels, which have been conducting this type of crowdfunding for Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic. So you just look for those different Telegram channels because they're searchable. And because they are searchable, think about the technologies are merging together. We can do data scraping. So within this time period, we have identified 3,348 Telegram channels, which have been pro-Lugansk, pro-Donetsk People's Republic. And interestingly, in those Telegram channels, there have been 363 cryptocurrency addresses. So they have been way less cryptocurrency addresses than they have been Telegram channels, which have been conducting this particular type of crowdfunding. It's connected with funds, crowdsourcing connected with knowledge. So maybe it's difficult to see the visualization now. We will just zoom in. What is possible? You can see now Bitcoin. The Bitcoin transfers. For those of you who have not been working with investigations, looks a bit confusing, but what you can see is on the left side to the center are all of the cryptocurrency wallets that we have aggregated together. On the left side, you have the money which is inflowing. On the right side, you have the money which is outflowing from this wallet in order to cash it out into the so-called fiat currency, US dollar, or mostly the ruble. Which you can see as a clear tendency is that the money has been coming in from a lot of different financial institutions that maybe you're not that familiar with when you didn't work with crypto, like Binance, one of the leading ones, Polynex, Coinbase, etc. There has been money flowing in. But when you think about where the money actually went to, it went to Huobi, which is a virtual asset service provider, where part of this virtual asset service provider is co-owned by a Russian investment fund, which is then owned by the Russian government. I'm just displaying the data because what we can do is we can transform data into information, but I am not a law enforcement agent, so I cannot reach out to those financial institutions which have to be registered in a jurisdiction which has incorporated cryptocurrencies into AML and CTF regulation, exactly what Alexandra has said, because there is a possibility to reach out to Binance and say, Binance, who has paid in 18,966 Bitcoins to those particular type of addresses? And Binance has to follow, has to have a law enforcement request and potentially would have to answer who has paid in. In the same way, how it is possible to ask who has cashed out those particular type of funds to Binance as well and Huobi. And we talk about transparency, right? But this type of investigation was able to be conducted very quickly. We have, of course, that's Bitcoin. In the same way how we can see different currencies, we have done the same analysis for USDT, another cryptocurrency, which is roughly 1-to-1 to the US dollar. Again, we can see outflow from Binance to Huobi. We can see outflow from Binance to Binance, right? So we see very similar players. So within this time period and the cryptocurrency wallets that we have analyzed, $4 million has been raised with these funds. 7 hours was this amount of time that we spent together on this analysis. So they are the two of us. It's like an two FTE equivalent. So it's like roughly a day that has been spent in order to visualize this particular data. We, of course, don't really know what this data means fully, because we can only transform a small part of data into information. But being a part of a larger network, both public and private, there's a possibility to plug in this particular information to somebody else who understands a wider picture. It doesn't have to be pretty us. So when you think about $4 million US dollars, it doesn't really sound like this would be a lot. This is a small city in Poland that is very close to the place where I grew up. I grew up in Gdansk, 400,000 people. Putsk has 8,000 inhabitants. It's next to the Baltic Sea, small and sleepy. But then $4 million US is actually enough to equip everyone in this city, 8,000 inhabitants, with a pistol and magazine with 12 bullets. So then you have to make a decision as a government or as a law enforcement unit. Is this something that you would like to look into, or something that you would say it's not that important in regards to how much, for example, the US has been donating on funds to Ukraine versus the $4 million that have been collected? Again, not our decision of somebody else. that needs to be taken, but then the technology is giving us all of the possibilities to conduct this particular type of investigations and draw those conclusions, both for the Russian side as well as for the Ukrainian side too, to understand who has been doing those type of transactions. Please keep in mind that Russia as well as Ukraine are both members of Interpol. They have not been kicked out of Interpol, so there is a possibility to use different international law enforcement agencies to potentially request KYC information. So coming back to the initial slides, so technology merges together. So here we can see a merge between data scraping, Telegram channels, as well as the aggregation of those, plus blockchain-based investigations. And on top of it, what was not possible before, there have been a growing number of countries which are following the so-called Financial Action Taskforce recommendation 15 and 16, which have asked the member states of FATF to incorporate virtual assets into their AML and CTF network. So the more countries will force those type of virtual assets to incorporate under AML and CTF, the more KYC we will be able to ask for, while seeing different type of transactions here, either from Barack Obama and then or Joe Biden Twitter hack, or from the Ukrainian perspective, while doing the crowdfunding for Russian militant groups. So I think that's just a small input on my end, and I think that here there are a lot of different nuances. What works, what doesn't really work. There are those moments where I have to go into the restroom and like bang my head against the door, because a lot of countries are doing clearly things that they shouldn't. But generally, I think just topping up on this, what Alexandra said, policymakers see the change. They see that they have to do something. They see that this is a growing ecosystem that they cannot ignore. What they don't know, what they supposed to, or what they fail at, is to what the response really should be. I can only see that when there is a Moneyval evaluation or Financial Action Task Force evaluation in front of those countries, then there is a movement, and there are a lot of emails if somebody can come in and help. And this is what we have been doing from both United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime technical expertise team, as well as the OSCE teams. But I have seen that there has been a lot of movement. Very often it's too little too late. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Michal. I would open now the Q&A session. We have around half an hour for questions and answers. Those participants who are online, you can actually type your questions to the Q&A, and I will see them on the computer and may post them to Michael or Alexandra. Those instead who are in the room, the floor is yours, and you can be asking. There will be Eleonora passing with the mic.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us online and being here. I actually have two questions, and forgive me, I don't have a background in tech, so if I sound like a grandma, I'm really sorry. I have all my knowledge from like attending Republica conferences. So the first one is, you said that the law enforcers could request from Binance and ask like who paid the money in and who withdrew the money. But the way I understand it, one of the big appeals is that a lot of it is anonymous. So how does that work? And my second question is, you talked about regulation, that you can either regulate the technology, the products, or the sphere. So the way I understand it, Mika very much regulates the technology, the product, but also what I understood from what I've known before about, especially about the blockchain, is that you can't really regulate it because it's so decentralized. So how does it work? And I'm sorry if I sound like a grandma not knowing anything about tech. Thank you.
Alexandra, should I take the Binance and law enforcement request part, and then you can take the Mika part?
Sure.
Sure. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I can go first.
Okay.
And I'll just say that, I think that, thank you for asking the question, because I think that many people have these kind of questions and feel like, oh, I don't want to ask this kind of a question, but it's extremely important to ask these questions precisely for, to take away a little bit of the complexities. So to answer the second question, so it might seem, because how lengthy Mika is, the first part defines different kinds of tools and different kinds of digital assets or crypto assets. But ultimately what MiCA focuses on is actually on the providers. So it focuses on not on the technology, even though it defines to some extent. And as Michael said, there are certain types of products that have been kicked out as let's say the NFTs or the entire decentralized finance have been kicked out. But all of those providers who either create exchanges or provide advices, or there's a list, I think there are like 8 different types. Those, as long as they provide services connected to those particular digital assets that are covered by MiCA, they are regulated. Michael?
Absolutely. On their application layer, and what can you ask on Binance? I think that the analogy Alexandra made to the internet is correct. So you can't really ask the internet about your passport, right? The internet will not really answer, or you cannot really ask electricity. But you are using internet in order to connect to your online banking. And once you use internet to connect to your online banking, you use a financial institution, which is then a bank, which has an obligation to ask for your personal information. The same logic can be applied here too. So as different virtual asset service providers, so-called, or crypto asset service providers within the EU would mean nearly the same, is just to confuse you, to make sure that we have too many terms in this already complex ecosystem, have been asked and then to register as financial institution under EU's Anti-Money Laundering Directive 5. And since then, they are financial institutions, and they have to keep track of the customers. They have to make sure that customers are being scanned against PEP and sanction lists when they are coming in. They have to do enhanced due diligence when customers are reaching 15,000 euro, and exactly in the same way how financial institutions are doing that. And just to be clear here, I have been a chief compliance officer from a virtual asset service provider, which is now traded on NASDAQ. And the Swedish Financial Supervisory Authority has investigated 2 largest players in Sweden, including me. So they have done this investigation, and it's public, and the results, I think, are pretty positive. But they have literally looked at us like we would be any other financial institution. And that's important. And this is this type of information that you can get, for example, from Binance, from Coinbase, from the other financial institutions when they are registered in the particular jurisdiction, which is forcing them to do AML and CTF. Sometimes it's tricky when they are registered in some kind of a tax haven, but they service individuals from particular jurisdictions where there is AML and CTF, not targeting those individuals, right? Because then the definition of the word targeting is something you can discuss with Alexandra. Then they argue that they don't target Swedish customers, so they don't have to obey Swedish laws, and it really depends on the regulator if they step in and what they ask them to do.
Thank you, Michal. Are there any questions in the room? Yes, there is one more. Please also say to whom do you address the question, either to Alexandra or to Michal.
Sure. Hi, I'm Moxie. This is for Dr. Andhov. I guess it's 2 questions. I'm wondering, are law enforcement being informed on different financial issues around the world? Like, is that part of their training? And then also, I was just wondering if you could touch a little bit more on organized criminal operations. Are most crime networks currently operating online with financial crime? Or like, I assume that's pretty sophisticated, so they would have to have a high level of intelligence to do that. And I'm just wondering how much of organized crime is currently happening in the online environment. So, thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'll allude a little bit to it, and then I think Michael can add on. Whether the law enforcement, I think they're starting to be. I think it's a fairly recent development that there would be this kind of training, but it's not just the law enforcement, right? It's not just the police officers, it's not just the investigators, it's also judges. It's also those people who decide, and I think that we need to talk about there more, because that's where I still see a lot of things lacking at this point. But it's moving that way, and I'm sure Michael can tell you that in some jurisdictions it's better, and in some it's worse, and in some they're more open to it, and some they are not. So it's just, there is a human factor connected to it. Regarding the organized criminal operations, so of course this is a bit more sophisticated crime. There is, I believe, I have it on my slides somewhere down the slide 32 or something like that. I'm using resources from a company called Chainalysis. And Chainalysis is a provider of different kinds of blockchain investigation tools. And every year they publish their criminal report. And in this criminal report, they look into different kinds of crime that is connected with and through blockchain or with digital assets. And there are some percentages that are offered there, but I see. That's fine. So yeah, now I lost the train of the thought. Thank you, Michael. But yeah, Chainalysis. So
I can top
yeah,
up on the Chainalysis, but yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, you can top it. Okay, come top it up.
Okay. My apologies. It's this time of the day where my daughter is like, can I spend some time with the father? I'm like, okay, what should I say at 7:42? So and a little feedback maybe starting where Alexandra stopped. The Financial Action Task Force has asked 6 leading providers of blockchain-based analytics to specify what is the amount of illicit transactions on the blockchain, right? If this helps, I can send a direct link to the document. Because there was a big difference, but I think Chainalysis has specified lately it's 0.28 of all of the different transactions, 0.16. And now, Alexander, you shake your head. No, I think this was 0.28. Let me just no, please go ahead.
No, it was more. It was
okay.
a bit more, but yeah, it doesn't matter.
0.34, like okay, roughly. Let's check in a document I'll be sharing with you. Thank you so much, Victoria. Thank you. So as I told you, it's a day of flags here and home. So what has happened is when the Financial Action Task Force has asked the six different providers, they have said that this is between 0.2 and 11.7. And when this means, when this is between 0.2 and 11.7, when our DNA will be off by 1%, we will be a cat, right? So even the Financial Action Task Force said that my apologies for that. When the Financial Action Task Force said that the data that have been presented by the blockchain-based analytic companies, they are inconclusive, right? So that it's even inconclusive for them. So I think that's clear. To answer your question, sorry, in simple terms, we don't have an idea. I think let's say that we don't really know how much illicit transfers is really happening on the blockchain, just to be honest here. But we don't really have a clear idea from a traditional financial crime perspective as well. When you will Google this, and now for those of you who worked with United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, there was a report that was released by 2018, I think. But it's before the pandemic, so I think that's not really conclusive as well. So we don't really know. It's somewhere between 0.8 and 11.8. On law enforcement, I am an eternal optimist, and I'm glad that Alexandra says that it's moving forward. I think it does. We have the problems that we usually have in working in silos, but times 10. Now I will be teaching a police agency in Central Europe. And for them, it's very difficult to attend my training because they don't really know if it's drug related, then it's a drug unit. When it's internet crime, then it's the internet unit, right? When there is a organized crime, it's the organized crime unit. And then they have really difficulties to understand who's supposed to be taking care of it. There was a very good Moneyval report. It's a subsection of the Financial Action Task Force working with Central Europe. They said that 80% of countries have member states of Moneyval have significant problems in keeping track of fighting financial crime within virtual assets. But I have a list of what those countries have done. Bosnia-Herzegovina has this, Serbia has done this. So I think that's very helpful. Maybe I can share this too. So you can not only see the challenges, but how countries started to anticipate and take particular solutions as well. And the last one, I promise my next answers will be very short, on organized crime and then the insights there. very often they are not as developed as you think. So they have been terrorists who have been printed out a cryptocurrency wallet address and say, please transfer the money there. We have locked this in the system so then we can trace it. So of course, I think there has been investment fraud and a lot of different developments in this area, which has been pretty problematic primarily in the Nordics. But generally speaking, when it comes to organized crime, terrorism, child sexual abuse, individuals were thinking that sending money via the blockchain within cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin is like going into a black hole. So nobody will find them. And I think this is one of the least smartest things what they can do. We are watching them, we see them, we are sending the law enforcement request about them, and we will trace them because these are high priority cases, and we'll continue doing that, and this will be better with the regulatory frameworks. So I think going into the blockchain is generally not very smart.
Michal, thank you very much. I have one comment. Thank you for raising the issue of silos and the fact that the law enforcement agency do not know whether to attend your training because they don't know whether this would be those that deal with drugs, etc., etc. We see this issue happening a lot. This is also kind of a jurisdiction question, a mandate question. Is this the unit that deals with most serious organized crime? So National Crime Agency unit, or this is other unit that should be looking into that. And then on the top, you have all that financial investigation that in some jurisdictions may be happening by a completely different unit. So when we talk about the parallel financial investigations, that would basically be done by somebody sitting somewhere else and not normally, in the very same unit. So this kind of spreading the deep fragmentation. It's also one of the reasons why Human Trafficking Initiative has been founded here at Johns Hopkins SAIS. It's exactly to counter this silos thinking and going out of the box and even saying, human trafficking is a form of organized crime which aim is gaining profit. So if you want to pursue trafficking, you need to first work in multi-agency, and then you have to not look for trafficking, but look for something. You may not find it. If you look, you need to look for something else and build pieces of the puzzle to get to that profit. That the exploitation of people is actually just a way of how to gain that profit. So to say, and reinvest it elsewhere. But I wanted to ask you the question that you actually wanted to say. You wanted to show your slides about how did you get to the suspect in the Telegram hack case. Can you very quickly mention that and how did you get to the suspect in the Telegram hack case? And I'm raising this Telegram hack case also because as a modus operandi in the context of the Ukrainian war, we have seen that, for example, civil society, some NGOs are a weak link of the system, where we have seen that NGO Twitters or other social media accounts were hacked in terms of providing crowdfunding for humanitarian assistance, so to say, but this was linked to organized crime as well. So as they can serve as a strong partner to the law enforcement, for example, specifically in pre-investigative phase, where you're gathering your information, turning it into intelligence, etc., etc. They may also be the weak link of the system, where they cannot, in fact, recognize indicators. Like you said, why don't you go just to Google? I couldn't tell to the law enforcement, why don't you just go to the Google and look at that? You at the same time could say, why couldn't you just see this huge red flag sign, which you could see, but if you do not know that this may be a modus operandi, then to you it doesn't seem that this is a red flag that someone may hack in this way. For example, a Telegram of a renowned NGO or etc. So yes, would you like to quickly go back to those slides on the Telegram?
Absolutely, and then thank you so much. And if in the time period when I will be doing that, on the chat I have placed you a link to the Financial Action Taskforce that I will kindly ask you to open, because then you will see a very confusing table. This is the latest evaluation of different countries by the Financial Action Taskforce, where you have all of the different recommendations. So for those of you who don't really work in this area, there's a Financial Action Taskforce that has been established by G7, or established, has been recommended, then you have this very, very confusing table with a lot of different countries and a lot of different colors. They are the following colors. Either countries are dark, deep green, they are compliant, or they are partially compliant, as PC, or they are or they are largely compliant, right? So largely compliant is light green. I think yellow, and partially compliant is a bit darker, or they're non-compliant. And then on the top you can see recommendation 15/16. Recommendation 15 is when the Financial Action Task Force said that they are asking the member states to make sure that virtual asset service providers are incorporated into AML and CTF network, AML and CTF regulation. And what is important, that always when countries are scoring pretty bad in those evaluations, it's way more expensive for them to raise fundings on the international markets. And that's the reason why they are getting super interested when there's another evaluation to come back to us saying, why don't you just help us with fixing this? And that's the reason why it creates urgency. And when this creates urgency, then this is the time when we can step in and fix certain things. So so by accident here, the Financial Action Task Force is helping us a lot to step in. I will just, of course, go down to the case, the construction. And then I think here we should be ready to go. Thank you so much for asking me this question. I really waited for it, so I think it's good. I promise to be brief. Okay, so we are back in the Twitter hack. So what you have done, I have shown to you the Twitter has been hacked in the same way. So there have been different Twitter messages, but there was always the same cryptocurrency wallet address, right? So what can be done is literally to extract this cryptocurrency wallet address, because this is what we started to do, to type it into the software that we have and understand how much money is flowing in and where is this money going. Because you would like to do two things. You would like to understand how much money is flowing to make sure that you can step in and do this particular type of investigation. And secondly, you would like to understand when this money hits a financial institution, so you can reach out to them, sometimes on Telegram or LinkedIn, saying, hey, Steve, this is the money that arrived from this particular account. Can you please freeze it? I wished that this would be different and we will have an international system how this works, but unfortunately, that's not really the case. So it does work with the network. So here we type in the cryptocurrency wallet address into Google. In this particular case, similar to what I described to you for the Ukrainian case, we can see that there have been 582 transactions that were flowing in. Roughly, there were 13 Bitcoins back then. So we can see the cryptocurrency wallet address. We can see the amount of transactions. Because it's nearly impossible for us to calculate back as human beings, say, okay, that's 13 Bitcoin. Is it a lot? Is it not a lot? What was the value of Bitcoin in 2015? Like, nobody knows. In most of those so-called wallet explorers, like search engines, you can type in the top, you can see USD or BTC. Then when you type in USD, then here we can see it's $224,000 that have been collected here. So there is a general information. When was the last transfer? How much money still remains? And in the bottom it says final balance. So at the current stage, the balance is $3,296 which are still in this particular account. So we know there are 582 transactions, $225,000, and still $3,840 in the account. Something you can find out in 10 minutes, or literally in 0 minutes. So this is an instant information. It's pseudo-anonymous. So as an investigator, you ask yourself, so what happened to those $221,000? What can we do? Then we have a little bit of repetition. So it is pseudo-anonymous. A best description of pseudo-anonymous for me, okay, it's my expired credit card. But here, when you take the credit card number and you don't really know my first name and last name, I think that's for me what is a good description of pseudo-anonymous, because you don't have this data, but then you will potentially reach out to Visa and MasterCard. They will point you to the bank that you know that has issued this card. And this bank will point you to the particular individual that has the personal information connected with this particular card. This example is not perfect because for credit cards, even if you don't have even if you don't have the first name or last name, you already can see in the first number what is then the country, or you can see the bank very quickly in those in the numbers of a credit card. With cryptocurrency wallet address is not really the case. So you have to, your key goal is to understand what is the centralized exchange that is working, or the financial institution that will have your personal information, right? So here, that's an oversimplification. My colleagues who work in crypto say, do not use this example. It's not perfect. It's the best I have. So how this works in practice, please do not get scared, because it looks often very confusing when you work on it for the first time. It is our cryptocurrency wallet still extracted from a Barack Obama scam. It's on the left side. Not sure if you can see it, but I think it's on the left side there where the yellow arrow goes to. Then you can see that the individuals behind it, they wanted to instantly send the money out. So they have sent it out to different other exchanges, and then different softwares are marking them in different colors. Here we can see that the money from the Twitter hack went to something what is called kraken.com and squareup.com. You can see that they are marked in different colors. So for example, here, both of those virtual asset service providers are marked in blue because they are registered in jurisdiction where you have AML and CTF. Those type of different red colors, they are different players which are, for example, operating in jurisdictions which are not really falling under AML and CTF yet. What does not mean that in 5 or 10 years' time you cannot redo this investigation and actually have some of the red parts marked as blue, right? Because the regulation changed. We're coming back to the confusing table from DATF. And a lot of countries have stepped up because they would like to borrow money cheaper on the international markets, and they can do it being fully compliant in all of those different places. So here we have two platforms where you can reach out and ask for KYC. The only thing that I can do as an investigator, which is not me being a chair of a digital asset task force of the Global Coalition to Fight Financial Crime, long names, I can just reach out saying, the money is coming from illicit source. According to anti-money laundering, you cannot cash out money which is coming from illicit source. Please stop the funds until law enforcement will step in and ask you for those funds. And then I can notify law enforcement. To be fair, and that's the part where I'm not very happy that this might be recorded and then shared 100%. Often I tend to do 95% of their work for them, so they can just take this documentation and just forward this to the platform so they can stop their funds when cases are important, right? So here we have a good example of Binance. Not good example as a platform, but a good example of a structure, because there's a government law enforcement request system where everyone who works for law enforcement can just go down. It's like a form field. Then you are being asked to say which type of cryptocurrency wallet address the transaction comes from. You can see this on a blockchain. When is this coming from? So then they stop the funds and then they can return the funds to you in a very oversimplified case. Then of course it gets a bit more technical. There are a lot of things that you can do without those different tools because they are pretty expensive, as we have an oligopoly of having 5 or 6 different tools which are very expensive. When you just type in the cryptocurrency wallet address and you scroll down, then you can see the amount of transactions. You can see the different providers. There are a lot of things that you can see. Very often you can even see that the transaction went to Kraken onto Binance with different providers. You don't have to have a blockchain analytical tool that sometimes is thousands of US dollars. The only thing that is important for investigators, always when you see the time of the transaction, it is not your local time, it's the UTC time. Because very often I have seen investigations fail because they put some kind of a data together with the suspect leaving the house and then doing something, but hey, they're in different time zones, right? So there are a lot of small nuances where our help is being needed. But yeah, and here you can see like one of the free wallet explorers. I know it's very confusing for those of you who sit in the back, but it literally says the money went to Binance, or it has been coming from Binance. And in this way, you can just reach out to Binance, click on this and say, oh, okay, there is a cryptocurrency wallet address, the last column on the right. When the transaction arrived this time period, please tell me who is this individual who has been receiving those funds or cashing them out, right? Yeah, and that's the gentleman who has been put behind bars. Seems not very exciting looking, but I think this went pretty quick. So this is the best I could have been doing this in 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Michal. And actually, we have reached the time limit for our series tonight. Thank you so much for having been with us. And thank you also, Dr. Andhov, and to you all present in the room and online. In case there are still some questions, you can reach out to us even after the session's over, and we may turn them to you then, Michal, over email. Thank you again, and have a lovely evening. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And please reach out on LinkedIn if you want to. And you have Alexandra, who's the best person in the room. And yeah, Victoria would like to say bye to you. And I think I'll just go say bye.
Bye,
And then-
Victoria.
Bye. 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 Thank you. Bye.